Hi there, it's me, Brett Fish, and welcome to another episode of Race with Me. Sometimes the words we use can create boundaries or barriers or obstacles between us and other people, maybe other people that we are trying to build bridges with or become better friends with. And so we need to learn as white people to start interrogating some of the words and the phrases that we use. So this idea of interrogating our words ties in very closely with the last one that we looked at, which was listening, because this becomes a principle that over time, we become more aware of it as we listen more, as we may be reading more, especially people that don't look like us, as we are doing the work in these places in our own life, as we constantly standing before the mirror trying to figure out where we get things right and wrong, as we're listening to people around us, we start to hear words and phrases that are unacceptable, and then we need to stop using them. We need to just stop using them. And maybe one of the easiest ones that feels like it doesn't need to be said is something like using a term boy to describe a 50, often 60-year-old man who is working in your garden. And as I say, that feels like something we don't have to deal with, and yet there are still people in South Africa today, or the woman who cleans your house or looks after your children, you speak about the girl, or the tea lady at work is the girl at work. And I mean, that one is just completely offensive. It feels so easy. It feels like we can just say, okay, guys, stop it. When you are referring to somebody over a certain age as boy or girl, and it's offensive in itself, but I think what makes it easier for us to get is if we can imagine our own parents being in that place and having somebody refer to them as boy or girl. I think it's a lot easier to see the offense there, although it needs to operate as a principle outside of just because it's somebody that's related to us. But I think often that helps us to get it. So that feels like an easy one. Another one is the term non-white. And as we are starting to do this work, we're going to find that there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of complication, tricky. This stuff isn't easy. Something that might be problematic for one person is going to be fine for another. And so it really is about ongoing work. It's not about suddenly getting all the answers. It's not about getting the handbook of what words are okay or not. It's just about listening, about being sensitive. And really, this idea is about cutting down things that I say that hurt other people. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to get it wrong, but we just need to jump in and start doing these things. And as we listen more, as we read more, we are going to get better at it. And it's okay to make mistakes. But the idea of non-white, and why I find that problematic, why a lot of people I think find that problematic, is that it centers white people. White people are the standard. White people are the norm. White is right. Everything else is less than. It's non-white. It's not quite there. It's almost there. It's not really there. It's very far away from there. And I think most of us would struggle being classified as non-something. There's just a sense of dehumanization in there. You're not a real person. And so there's a lot going on there. But to call somebody non-white, and that's one that a lot of people use, feels quite offensive to me. Now, where I found this problematic was I was sitting in a school situation with the principal, with the social worker, and with a teacher who identified himself as colored. And he, the colored guy, used the phrase non-white in the conversation. And by the end of the conversation, the principal was referring to non-whites. And so that becomes tricky. How do I, as a white person, sit and tell a colored person not to use the phrase non-white? It's complicated. We figured that out over time. But in a general sense, with most people, there's so many problems with it. Hopefully I've made that clear. And so what do you do if you don't call somebody non-white? A term that is more acceptable for most people, I think, but contains problems is people of color. And again, there's a sense of white being very different to everyone else, or people of color. So we need to think about it. We need to explore it. But that was what I was using. I moved away from non-white. I was using people of color. And then I was at a conversation in KwaZulu-Natal a couple of years ago, and after the talk, which was on race, an Indian guy came up to me and he said, I have a problem with the term people of color. Now, I've probably been doing this work for about 7 years, and that's the first time that I've ever had anyone come to me and say, I've got a problem with the term people of color. But because I knew that it was offensive to this guy or would hurt this guy, he didn't like it, I moved away from using the term people of color to naming it. And so I will talk about black, colored, and Indian people, typically. And there's problems in there as well, as we'll figure out. But I don't think it's about being pedantic. I don't think it's about being politically correct. The heart of this is, how can I use my language in a way that doesn't hurt you? That feels like an easy ask. It's not about, it really is about caring for someone else. It's about being sensitive to what someone else wants. And so I found with labels, a lot of people find labels unhelpful, and we know race is a construct, it's a made up thing, but because the work we have to do was created by issues around race, we have to use labels. And so I find in conversations on race, we typically do need labels. And in each situation, I will try and figure out what's helpful. Ask the crowd, ask people, is it okay if I say this? How would you like me to speak about these things? And figure out the terms together beforehand. If you're in a conversation with friends, you start to figure out what they like and what they don't like. So speaking about nuance, I'll mention another example. I've got friends in Cape Town who would be classified as colored, and some of them embrace and love the term colored, and they are doing deep work on trying to understand, what does a colored identity mean. It's a complicated identity, and there's a lot of stuff there, and I can only see that from the outside, but hearing from a lot of my friends that are there, it's really tricky, and they're doing a lot of work, and it's amazing. But then I know some other people that from the outside would be classified as colored that hate the term colored. And so you've got people that love the term colored, you've got people that hate the term colored. If I use the one, it's going to offend one person. If I don't use the same term, it's going to offend someone else. What do I do there? It's hard, it's tricky, I learn as I go along. And so when I'm with my friends that are working on the identity of being colored, I'll use the phrase colored, because I know it's a sign of love and affection and just seeing them. And when I'm in conversation with people that I know really hate the term colored, then I will try and stay away from the term colored. Some people prefer brown people, and there's a mix. And it's really about listening and learning and growing in relationship with people, and being shown grace when you get it wrong, when you hurt someone, being able to say, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was offensive to you. Please help me understand. What would you like to be called? How do we have this conversation that kind of needs terms, and figure it out? And the same thing goes with Biko Black. Biko Black is the idea of all people that were not white in South Africa that were treated less than in different ways. And so it includes people who would be called colored and Indian. And some colored and Indian people find it offensive to be called black, Biko Black. And others embrace it. I know some colored friends of mine who would call themselves black. And so it really is... It is a place of learning, and we can see that as a minefield, and I've got to be so careful with what I say and all that kind of thing, but we could also see it as an opportunity to learn and grow and build bridges, and that is exciting to me. Another term that you kind of hear a lot, and usually it comes from racist people that are not doing the work, is the idea of those people. These people, it's those people again. And everybody knows exactly who we're talking about. Those people are messing up the beaches. Those people are protesting. Typically, when you hear people say these people or those people about a collective group of people, it's negative. I've never heard people celebrating, it's those people again. And it's that whole thing of stereotyping and collectivizing a whole group based on the actions of a few people, which doesn't tend to happen to white people a lot. You don't tend to hear those people with white people unless it's a very specific those people, speaking about the Karen or the Brad or whatever name we use for the typical moaning, nasally white person that's asking to see the manager, that kind of thing. So stay away from those people and these people. Another phrase that I particularly hate is the blacks. I think I would choose to say black people instead of the blacks. It just feels a lot less personal in a way, and that might be my own personal thing. Again, other people might have a different way of seeing this, but it really is about doing the work. It's not so much about getting the words right in a sense as to understanding the context, understanding the people you're with, and removing harmful words from your vocabulary. And maybe in your family, like your gran calls the gardener boy because that's how she grew up and that's all she's ever known. And in a sense of how she got there, cool. Don't penalize for her for that. Don't punish her for that. But take an opportunity to educate. When somebody gets it wrong, there's often an opportunity to sit alongside them and say, hey, I think that's really hurtful. Or could we look at some other terms that might be better? Or like, this feels... Yeah, there's just a space to learn, which I think is something we can embrace. And if we are white people saying, but what can I do? Then get excited about learning. Get excited about getting it better today than I got it yesterday. Get excited about moving away from a mistake and fixing it and making it better and being better because of it. Don't see this thing as, oh, I've got to do all this work. It's so hard. I keep getting it wrong. I never say the right thing. This is an opportunity for greatness, and let's embrace it. And there's a quote that I want to read that links to this, and it is from someone called Ntabi Ndladla, and she said this: "There's so much that must be unlearned in order to learn anew in South Africa. The least white people can begin with is to acknowledge us as fellow human beings. Next is to see individuals not just as a bunch of homogeneous species. Then it can be a little easier to want to know how and what each person rather prefers." And so there's kind of like a journey in that. Like the very least thing is acknowledge that, and then stop seeing us as a group, and then maybe then you'll start to develop empathy. You'll want to know what each of us prefers. And that's really where this work happens, in relationship with people. But as we do this work, you watching this video, reading articles, reading books, it takes away the pain of when we get it wrong with our black, colored, and Indian friends. And so this is a really good space because it's a safe space for us to make mistakes that don't hurt people. So ask questions, push back, share some questions in the comments, like, is this okay? Is this problematic? Why is this a problem? Let's figure out together so other people don't have to do that work with us. And then the last thing I'd say on this thing is that this feels like a kind of not on your watch mentality, the commitment to interrupt racism wherever I see it. And so I want to encourage you to do this work in yourself. What are the words that I need to interrogate in my own life that are wrong, that are harmful, that mess up, that cause pain in other people? But then the bold challenge is to step out into where you see other people doing it. Start with family members, start with friends. When a parent says something that is racist, that is unhelpful, when somebody around you says non-white, another white person calls somebody non-white, find a moment, do it graciously, pull them aside, one-to-one. Hey, this is what I learned about why that's not the best way to talk. Can we explore some other ways together? Let's start being bold on interrupting things that hurt people wherever we see them. And it begins by us interrogating our own words and phrases, and then by us starting to look out and be prepared to be bold when we see others doing the same.